The notification chimed at 2:47 a.m., and I knew my marriage was over. Not because of some dramatic revelation or earth-shattering confrontation. Just a simple location ping from Selah's iPad that she'd forgotten was synced to my phone. The address showed 412 Maple Street, which happened to be the notorious party house where half the college kids in our upstate New York town went to make mistakes they'd regret for decades. My name is Dean Callix, and I'm what you'd call professionally underestimated. At 33, I run a small contracting business, fix people's broken pipes and rotted deck boards, and apparently married a woman who thinks I'm too stupid to notice when she lies to my face. Selah told me she was having a quiet girls' night with her law firm colleagues, Mira, Jules, and Ray, just wine and wedding planning at Mira's apartment. The wedding. Our wedding. Scheduled for next Saturday at the historic Riverside Inn, with 200 guests, a 5-tier cake, and a honeymoon in Tuscany that I'd been saving for since we got engaged 18 months ago. I stared at that blinking dot on my phone screen, sitting in our bedroom in the old Victorian fixer-upper we'd bought together. The house groaned around me like it was trying to warn me about something. Selah's side of the bed was cold, her pillow still perfectly fluffed. She'd left at 7, claiming she needed to decompress before the big day. I'm not stalking, I told myself as I pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt. I'm just technologically savvy. There's a difference. The drive to Maple Street took 12 minutes through empty streets, lined with century-old maples that gave the town its postcard charm. I'd rewired half the houses in this neighborhood, knew which ones had foundation problems and which ones had secrets hidden behind fresh paint. But 412 Maple Street was different. A sprawling colonial that some trust fund kid had inherited and turned into party central for the university crowd. Music thumped from inside, bass lines vibrating through the windows. Cars packed the driveway and spilled onto the street, expensive sedans mixed with beat-up student vehicles. I recognized Selah's silver Audi parked sideways across 2 spaces, the way she always parked when she'd been drinking. The front door stood wide open, warm air and laughter spilling onto the porch. I walked in like I belonged there, past clusters of 20-somethings holding red cups and shouting over the music. The living room was a maze of bodies, most of them young enough to be carded, all of them having the kind of fun that made terrible stories later. I found her in the back room, what used to be a den before someone stripped out the furniture and installed a sound system that could wake the neighbors 3 blocks away. Selah was in the center of a loose circle, her dark hair wild around her shoulders, her designer dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary, riding up her thighs as she danced. She wasn't dancing alone. 2 guys flanked her, both college-aged, both grinding against her like they were auditioning for a music video. The taller one had his hands on her hips, the shorter one pressed against her back. Selah's head was thrown back, eyes closed, completely lost in the moment. Her wedding ring caught the colored lights as her hands moved over the tall guy's chest. The room seemed to tilt sideways, not from shock. I'd suspected something like this for weeks. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd started treating me like furniture that came with the house. No, this was the tilting sensation of everything finally clicking into place, like when you solve a puzzle you didn't realize you were working on. I pushed through the crowd, not caring who I bumped into or what drinks I knocked over. The music was so loud that nobody noticed me until I was right behind them. I tapped the tall guy on the shoulder. He turned with a drunk, annoyed expression that shifted to confusion when he saw me. "Excuse me," I said, loud enough to be heard over the bass. "That's my fiancée you're molesting." Selah's eyes snapped open. For a split second, I saw genuine fear there, followed immediately by the calculating look I'd learned to recognize over 3 years of marriage and 2 years of dating before that. She was already working on her story, figuring out how to spin this. "Dean," she said, stepping away from the guys, but not far enough to look innocent. "What are you doing here? I told you I was having a quiet night with the girls. Right, I said, looking around at the chaos. This is very quiet, very girl-focused. The tall guy, blonde, athletic, probably on the university rowing team, stepped forward with the kind of swagger that only comes from never facing real consequences. Is there a problem here, old man? Old man. I was 6 years older than him, tops, but apparently that made me ancient in his world. No problem, I said, just collecting my wife. She doesn't look like she wants to be collected, he said, grinning at his own cleverness. I looked at Selah, really looked at her. Her lipstick was smeared, her hair was a mess, and there were hands' prints on her dress. She was swaying slightly, either from the music or the alcohol or both. This was the woman I was supposed to marry in 6 days, the woman I'd bought a house with, the woman I'd trusted with half of everything I owned. You're right, I said to the rowing team reject. She doesn't. Then I bent down, scooped Selah up like a sack of flour, and threw her over my shoulder. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The room went completely silent except for the music, which suddenly seemed obscenely loud. Selah started hitting my back and demanding I put her down, but I was already walking toward the door. The crowd parted like I was carrying a live grenade, which wasn't far from the truth. Outside, the cool night air hit my face like a slap. I carried Selah all the way to her Audi before setting her down, none too gently. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she hissed, smoothing down her dress and trying to fix her hair. "You just humiliated me in front of everyone." "I humiliated you?" I asked. "That's interesting, because from where I was standing, you were doing a pretty good job of that yourself." "It was just dancing, Dean. God, you're so paranoid." "Just dancing," I repeated, "with 2 guys, at a party you lied about attending, while wearing your wedding ring." She opened her mouth to respond, but we were interrupted by footsteps on the gravel. Mira appeared, tottering on high heels, with Ray right behind her. Mira was Selah's best friend and maid of honor, a sharp-faced brunette who worked at the same law firm and had never liked me. Ray was the social media addict of the group, always recording everything for her various online accounts. "Selah, honey, are you okay?" Mira asked, shooting me a look that could have stripped paint. "Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine," Selah said quickly. "Dean's just being dramatic." "Dramatic," I said. "Right, because expecting your fiancé to not grind on college boys is totally unreasonable." Ray, who'd been unusually quiet, stepped forward with something in her hand. A small USB drive, the kind I used for backing up project files. She held it out to me with a grin that was equal parts malicious and sympathetic. "You should see this before you marry her," she said. I took the drive, feeling its weight, maybe an ounce of plastic and metal that somehow felt heavier than the house I'd been renovating for 2 years. "What is it?" "Insurance," Ray said. "I record everything at parties. You never know when you'll need proof of what really happened." Selah went pale. Actually, pale, like someone had drained the color from her face with a syringe. "Ray, don't." "Don't what?" I asked, looking between them. "What's on here, Selah?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just party footage. Ray's always filming." But Mira was backing away, and Ray was still grinning, and Selah looked like she might throw up on her designer shoes. Whatever was on that drive, it wasn't nothing. "I think I'll take a look," I said, pocketing the USB, "after I get you home." The ride back to our house was silent, except for the hum of tires on asphalt and Selah's occasional sniffling. She tried to start conversations twice, once to explain that she'd only had a few drinks, once to remind me that we had the final venue walkthrough tomorrow. But I wasn't in a talking mood. Our house looked different when we pulled into the driveway, like I was seeing it through new eyes. All those weekends I'd spent stripping wallpaper and refinishing floors, all those evenings we'd planned where to put furniture and how to arrange the kitchen. The porch light I'd installed last month cast everything in a warm, welcoming glow that suddenly felt like a lie. Inside, Selah headed straight for the stairs, probably hoping to shower off the evidence and pretend this had never happened. But I caught her arm gently, not rough, but firm enough to stop her. "We need to talk," I said. "Not tonight, Dean. I'm tired and you're angry, and nothing good happens when we try to have serious conversations like this." She was right about that much. When Selah wanted to avoid a conversation, she was an expert at deflection and delay. But I was holding a USB drive that apparently contained something she desperately didn't want me to see, and my patience for her games had finally run out. "Sit," I said, pointing to the couch we'd picked out together at a furniture store in Albany. "I'm going to look at this, and you're going to explain what I'm seeing." She sat, perching on the edge of the cushions like she was ready to run. I went to my laptop, plugged in the drive, and opened the video files. There were dozens of them, all time-stamped from tonight, all showing different angles of the party. The first few were harmless, people dancing, laughing, playing drinking games. Then I found the folder labeled Upstairs, and everything changed. The video was grainy, shot through a partially open door, but the audio was crystal clear. Selah's voice, breathless and excited. A male voice I didn't recognize, confident and commanding. And then another male voice, younger, eager to please. I won't describe what I saw in detail, but it wasn't dancing. It wasn't innocent. And it definitely wasn't the behavior of a woman getting married in 6 days. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. Less than 3 hours ago, while I was at home reviewing contractor bids and planning our future, Selah was upstairs at a college party, doing things that would have ended our relationship instantly if I'd walked in on them. I closed the laptop and looked at her. She was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd been caught and was trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. "Dean," she started, "I can explain—" "No," I said. "You can't. There's no explanation for this. There's no context that makes it okay. There's nothing you can say that changes what I just watched. It was just a mistake. I was drunk, and they were persistent, and I wasn't thinking clearly." "They?" I asked. "Plural?" She closed her mouth so fast I heard her teeth click together. I was done being the nice guy, done being the understanding husband who made excuses for his wife's behavior, done being the contractor who was too blue-collar to understand the sophisticated world of law firm politics and professional networking. I went upstairs and started packing her things. By sunrise, I'd transformed from a heartbroken fiancé into something much more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and a talent for systematic problem-solving. I'd spent the night working with the methodical precision I usually reserved for complex renovation projects. First, I'd backed up the video files to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I'd gone through Selah's laptop. She'd never bothered to change the password from our anniversary date, and documented everything I found. Email threads with someone named Evan discussing discreet meetings. Text messages with Mira about what Dean doesn't know won't hurt him. Calendar entries that didn't match the stories she'd told me. If lying was an Olympic sport, she'd bring home gold. Selah had passed out on the couch around 4 a.m., still in her party dress, makeup smeared across the throw pillow I'd bought her for Christmas. I'd covered her with a blanket, old habits, and kept working. By the time she woke up at 9, I'd already accomplished more than most people do in a week. "Dean?" she called from the living room, her voice hoarse and confused. "What's going on? Why are my suitcases by the door?" I came down from the bedroom carrying the last of her law books. She was sitting up, hair sticking in every direction, looking around the room like she'd woken up in a stranger's house. "I'm helping you move out," I said, setting the books next to the suitcases. Seemed like the considerate thing to do. "Move out? Dean, we need to talk about last night. I know how it looked, but—" "How it looked?" I interrupted. Selah, I have video evidence of you with two men in a bedroom. There's no how it looked about it. There's just what happened. She stood up, swaying slightly, and I caught a whiff of stale alcohol and unfamiliar cologne. You can't just kick me out. This is my house, too. Actually, it's not. I pulled out a folder of legal documents I'd been reviewing since 5 a.m. The deed is in my name only, remember? You said it would be easier for the mortgage approval since I was self-employed. The only joint accounts we have are checking and savings, and I've already removed your access to those. Her face went through several interesting color changes. You can't do that. I can, and I did. I also canceled the wedding venue, the caterer, the florist, and the photographer. Sent emails to all the guests from your account explaining that the bride had a change of heart. That got her attention. She lunged for her phone, fingers flying over the screen. I watched her face crumble as she read the messages I'd sent. You had no right. I had every right. I'm not paying $40,000 for a wedding to a woman who's been cheating on me. Call me old-fashioned. It wasn't cheating. We're not married yet. We're engaged. We live together. We share bank accounts and a mortgage application. If you want to play semantic games about what constitutes cheating, you picked the wrong guy. I rewire houses for a living. I know when circuits don't match the blueprint. She sank back onto the couch, phone clutched in her hands. Dean, please, can we just talk about this rationally? I made a mistake, okay? A stupid, drunken mistake. But we can work through this. No, I said. We can't, because this wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidental. You made choices. You chose to lie about where you were going. You chose to drink until you couldn't make good decisions. You chose to go upstairs with two men. You chose to do what you did while wearing the ring I gave you. I sat down across from her, leaning forward so she couldn't avoid looking at me. But here's what really gets me, Selah. It's not just that you cheated. It's that you're sitting here trying to minimize it, trying to make me feel like I'm overreacting, like I'm the problem for not being understanding enough about my fiancé's recreational infidelity. That's not. It is exactly that. You're more upset about getting caught than you are about what you did. You're more worried about the wedding being canceled than you are about our relationship being over. That tells me everything I need to know about how you really feel about this engagement. She started crying again, but I was immune to it now. I'd seen too much, learned too much, understood too much about who she really was underneath the lawyer facade and the wedding planning enthusiasm. My phone buzzed with a text from Rusty, my old friend, who'd become a private investigator after leaving the police force. Heard about the wedding. You okay? News traveled fast in our town, especially when it involved public humiliation at student parties. I texted back, better than okay, free as a bird. Selah looked up from her phone. People are already talking about this, aren't they? Small town, I said. You know how it is. Someone probably posted video of me carrying you out of that party last night. By noon, everyone will know the wedding's off. You're enjoying this, she accused. You're actually enjoying destroying my reputation. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just not protecting you from the consequences of your choices anymore. There's a difference. She stood up, gathering what dignity she could manage while wearing yesterday's party dress and yesterday's makeup. Fine. I'll stay at Mira's until I can figure something else out. But this isn't over, Dean. You can't just throw away 3 years like this. Watch me. After she left, I sat in the quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. No more walking on eggshells around Selah's moods. No more pretending her late nights and secretive phone calls were normal. No more being made to feel like my concerns were paranoid jealousy, but I wasn't done. Not even close. I opened my laptop and started phase 2 of what I was already thinking of as the Selah project. If she wanted to play games with people's lives, she was about to learn that some people were better at games than others. First stop, her law firm. Whitman, Burke and Associates occupied the top floor of the nicest office building downtown, All glass and chrome and expensive furniture designed to intimidate clients into paying higher fees. I'd done some electrical work there 2 years ago, back when Selah was still a junior associate trying to impress the partners. I took the elevator to the 5th floor, carrying a manila envelope and wearing my best contractor clothes. Clean jeans, button-down shirt, work boots that had been polished but still looked like I used them for actual work. The receptionist, a young woman who probably made more in a month than most people in town made in 3, looked at me like I'd tracked mud across her Persian rug. "I'm here to see Mr. Whitman," I said. "It's about Dean Callix. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he'll want to see this." I held up the envelope. "It's regarding a personnel matter." She made a phone call, spoke in hushed tones, then directed me to a conference room where I waited for 10 minutes before Richard Whitman appeared. He was exactly what you'd expect from a senior partner at a small-town law firm. Expensive suit, silver hair, handshake that lasted exactly the right amount of time to convey authority without seeming aggressive. "Mr. Callix," he said, settling into a chair across from me. "I understand you have some concerns about Ms. Callix?" "Former Ms. Callix," I corrected. "We're no longer engaged. I thought you should know that before any partnership decisions are made." His eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. And this requires a meeting because—" I slid the envelope across the table. "Because I thought you should understand why the engagement ended. Your firm represents several family-oriented businesses in town, conservative clients, the kind who care about the personal conduct of their legal representation." He opened the envelope and examined the printed screenshots I'd selected. Not the explicit video, but clear images of Selah at the party, disheveled and obviously intoxicated, with timestamp and location data visible. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly. "Mr. Callix, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but Ms. Callix's personal life is public record now," I interrupted. "These images are already circulating on social media. By tomorrow, everyone in town will have seen them. I just thought you should know before your clients start asking questions about the junior partner who made a spectacle of herself at a college party." I stood up, leaving the envelope on the table. "Have a good day, Mr. Whitman. I'm sure you'll handle this with your usual discretion." From the law firm, I drove to Murphy's Tavern, the kind of neighborhood bar where everyone knew everyone else's business and wasn't shy about discussing it. Letitia, my cousin, had been tending bar there for 15 years and had elevated gossip to an art form. "Dean!" she called when I walked in. "Heard you had some excitement last night." "Word travels fast," I said, sliding onto a bar stool. "Honey, in this town, word travels at light speed, especially when it involves someone carrying their drunk fiancé out of a party like a caveman." She poured me a beer without asking what I wanted. "So what's the real story?" I gave her the edited version. Enough truth to be believable, enough detail to be interesting, nothing so explicit that it would make me look vindictive. Letitia listened with the focused attention of a professional gossip, asking exactly the right questions to get the maximum story value. "So, the wedding's really off?" she asked. "Completely off. Selah's moving out today." "Damn shame," she said, but her tone suggested it wasn't a shame at all. "Though I have to say, I never thought she was right for you. Too ambitious, you know. Like she was always looking for something better to come along." Apparently, she found it. 2 somethings, actually. Letitia's eyes lit up. 2? Oh, honey, you buried the lead there. By the time I left Murphy's, I knew the story would be all over town by evening. Letitia had a network of information that would make the CIA jealous, and she wasn't shy about using it. My phone rang as I was walking back to my truck. Selah's number. "What did you do?" she demanded, without preamble. "I'm going to need you to be more specific." "Whitman just called me into his office. He's concerned about my judgment and thinks I should take some time off to reassess my priorities." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. I thought he should know why our engagement ended before he made any partnership decisions." You showed him the pictures, didn't you? You vindictive. I showed him publicly available social media images that demonstrate your recent recreational activities. If that affects your career, maybe you should have considered that before you decided to audition for a music video at a college party. This is harassment, Dean. I could sue you for… For what? Telling the truth? Sharing images that are already circulating online? Good luck with that. You're a lawyer. You know exactly how weak that case would be. She hung up on me, which I took as a victory. My phone buzzed immediately with a text from Rusty. Heard you paid a visit to Whitman's office. Want to grab a beer and tell me about it? I texted back, Murphy's, 1 hour. But first, I had one more stop to make. If Selah wanted to play hardball, she was about to learn that I'd been playing in a different league all along. Rusty was already at Murphy's when I arrived, sitting in our usual booth near the back where the lighting was dim and the conversations were private. He looked exactly like what he was, a former cop who'd seen too much and decided the private sector was less stressful. Gray hair, weathered face, eyes that missed nothing. You look better than I expected, he said when I sat down. Usually when a man's engagement implodes, he looks like he's been hit by a truck. I feel like I've been hit by a truck, I admitted. But it's a good kind of truck, the kind that knocks sense into you. Letitia brought over 2 beers and a basket of pretzels, lingering just long enough to make it clear she was available for consultation if we needed her expertise on local scandal management. So, Rusty said when she'd gone back to the bar, want to tell me what really happened? I gave him the full story, including details I'd kept to myself earlier. Rusty listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he sat back and studied me with the expression he'd probably used on suspects back in his police days. You're handling this awfully well for a guy who just discovered his fiancée was cheating, he said. Maybe because part of me already knew. I just didn't want to admit it. And now you're what? Getting revenge? That's not like you, Dean. I'm not getting revenge. I'm just not protecting her from the consequences of her choices anymore. There's a difference. He smiled at that. You keep saying that. I'm starting to think you're trying to convince yourself as much as everyone else. Before I could respond, the front door opened and a familiar figure walked in. Tall, blonde, athletic build, wearing a university sweatshirt and the kind of confident expression that suggested he'd never faced a real challenge in his life. It was the guy from the party, the one who'd called me old man. Well, I said, this just got interesting. Rusty followed my gaze and raised an eyebrows. Friend of yours? That's Evan, one of Selah's dance partners from last night. Evan had spotted us and was walking over with the swagger of someone who thought he was about to win an argument. He stopped at our table, hands on his hips, looking down at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. You're Dean, right? He said. Selah's ex? That's right. And you're Evan, the guy who thinks other men's fiancés are community property. His face flushed red. Look, old man, what happened last night was between consenting adults. Selah's a grown woman who can make her own choices. Absolutely, I agreed. And I'm a grown man who can make his own choices about how to respond to those choices. What's that supposed to mean? I stood up slowly, noting that even with his height advantage, Evan took a half step backward. It means that actions have consequences. Selah's learning that lesson right now. Maybe it's time you learned it too. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. See, I know who you are, Evan Kroll. Graduate student in the business program, teaching assistant for Professor Morrison's marketing class, president of Delta Chi fraternity. I also know you've got a pattern of pursuing married women and engaged women. Apparently, it's your specialty. His confident expression faltered. How do you know that? Because I'm very good at research. It's part of my job. When someone hires me to renovate their house, I don't just show up with a hammer and hope for the best. I investigate, I plan, I gather information. I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of his social media profile. Nice car, by the way. That BMW must have cost your parents a fortune. What does my car have to do with anything? Just making conversation. It's parked outside, right? The blue one with the custom rims? He nodded warily. Good. I'd hate for anything to happen to it. Rusty cleared his throat. Dean, maybe we should… Relax, I said. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm just going to have a conversation with Evan here about appropriate boundaries. Evan was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Look, I don't want any trouble. What happened with Selah was her idea. She came on to me. I'm sure she did. But here's the thing, Evan. You had a choice. You could have said no. You could have remembered that she was wearing an engagement ring and walked away. Instead, you decided to take advantage of a drunk woman who was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. She wasn't that drunk. She was drunk enough to make decisions she wouldn't have made sober. You know how I know that? Because I've known her for 5 years, and for all her faults, she's not usually the type to perform for an audience. Evan's face went pale. Perform for an audience? Oh, you didn't know about the video? Ray records everything at parties. Didn't you notice her filming? He hadn't noticed. That was obvious from his expression. There's a video? Multiple angles. Very artistic. I'm thinking of submitting it to the university's ethics committee. I'm sure they'd be interested to know how their graduate students and teaching assistants spend their free time. You can't do that. It would ruin my career. Really? That's terrible. Almost as terrible as ruining someone's marriage would be. I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. Here's what's going to happen, Evan. You're going to stay away from Selah. You're going to stay away from me. And if I hear that you've been bragging about your conquest or sharing details about what happened, that video is going straight to Professor Morrison, the Dean of Students, and your fraternity's national headquarters. This is blackmail. This is education. You're learning that actions have consequences. Consider it part of your graduate curriculum. I sat back down, picked up my beer, and took a long drink. Evan stood there for another moment, clearly trying to think of something threatening or clever to say. When nothing came to him, he turned and walked toward the door. Evan, I called after him. He stopped and looked back. Nice talking with you. Drive carefully. After he left, Rusty stared at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. That was either very smart or very stupid. I'm not sure which. Probably both. But I'm tired of being the nice guy who gets walked on. If people want to play games with my life, they need to understand that I'm better at games than they think. Just be careful, Dean. Guys like that don't like being humiliated. They tend to do stupid things when their egos get bruised. Let him do something stupid. I've got everything documented. If he wants to escalate this, he'll just be giving me more ammunition. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. I showed it to Rusty, who shook his head. See? Stupid things. I typed back. You're absolutely right. It's just getting started. Then I forwarded the threatening text to my own email account and saved it to the growing file of documentation I was building. If Evan wanted to play hardball, he'd picked the wrong contractor. Letitia appeared at our table with another round of beers. Wasn't that the boy who was with Selah at the party last night? How did you… Never mind. Yes, that was him. He looked upset when he left. You didn't threaten him, did you? I educated him about the consequences of poor decision-making. She grinned. Good. Boys like that think they can do whatever they want without paying for it. About time someone taught him different. After Rusty left, I sat alone in the bar, nursing my beer and thinking about what came next. I'd disrupted Selah's career and scared off her lover, but I wasn't satisfied yet. There was still the matter of her friends, the ones who'd enabled her behavior and helped her lie to me. The ones who thought I was too stupid to figure out what was really going on. My phone rang. Selah again. What did you say to Evan? She demanded. We had a conversation about boundaries and consequences. Why? He's refusing to see me. He says you threatened him. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply explained the situation from his perspective. Apparently, he decided that discretion was the better part of valor. "You're destroying my life, Dean." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just not fixing the things you're breaking anymore. There's a difference. Stop saying that. Stop acting like you're some kind of victim here." "I'm not a victim. Victims are helpless. I'm just a guy who's finally tired of being taken for granted." She hung up again, but this time I was expecting it. I finished my beer, left money on the table for Letitia, and walked out to my truck. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few regulars' cars, and Evan's BMW was parked 3 spaces away from my truck, and it looked like it had been redecorated. Someone had keyed "liar" into the driver's side door in letters 6 inches tall. The windshield had "cheater" written across it in what looked like soap or shaving cream. I looked around the parking lot, but whoever had done it was long gone. I pulled out my phone and took pictures from several angles, then sent them to Rusty with a message. "Looks like someone doesn't approve of Evan's recreational activities." He texted back immediately, "That wasn't you?" "Nope, but I can't say I'm upset about it." As I drove home, I thought about the fact that I wasn't the only person in town who was tired of entitled college kids thinking they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. Apparently, Evan had made more enemies than just me. That was useful information. In a small town, reputation was everything, and Evans was apparently more fragile than he'd realized. I was starting to understand that this wasn't just about my failed engagement anymore. This was about something bigger, about people who thought they were above consequences learning that they weren't as untouchable as they believed. And I was just getting started. The next morning brought the kind of autumn weather that made upstate New York look like a postcard. Crisp air, golden leaves, the smell of wood smoke from someone's fireplace. I was drinking coffee on my front porch, enjoying the peace and quiet of a house without Selah's constant drama, when Ms. Harker appeared at my garden gate. Eleanor Harker was 73 years old, lived alone in the Victorian next door, and knew more about everyone's business than the FBI. She'd been watching our neighborhood like a hawk for 40 years, and nothing happened on our block without her knowledge and commentary. "Good morning, Dean," she called, waving a manila envelope. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Morning, Ms. Harker. It certainly is." She approached the porch with the careful steps of someone who'd learned not to trust autumn leaves on wet sidewalks. "I heard about your engagement. I'm sorry things didn't work out." "Thank you. I think it's for the best." "Oh, I'm sure it is. That girl was never right for you." She handed me the envelope. "I thought you might find these interesting." Inside were photographs, dozens of them, all taken with a telephoto lens from what must have been her upstairs window. They showed Selah and Evan meeting at various locations around town over the past month. Coffee shops, parks, the parking lot behind the library. In several of them, they were clearly more than friends. "Ms. Harker?" I said, looking up at her sharp blue eyes. "How long have you been taking these?" "About 6 weeks. I noticed them meeting shortly after Labor Day. At first, I thought it might be innocent. Maybe he was a client or something. But their body language..." She shook her head. "I've been married twice and divorced once. I know what inappropriate looks like." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me. Young men in love never want to hear that their women are straying. They have to figure it out for themselves." She was right about that. If she'd approached me 2 weeks ago with these photos, I would have dismissed them as the paranoid fantasies of a lonely old woman. Now they were just confirmation of what I already knew. "What do you want me to do with these?" I asked. "Whatever you think is appropriate. I just thought you should have evidence of what really happened, in case anyone tries to make you out to be the villain in this story." After she left, I spread the photos across my kitchen table and studied them chronologically. They told a story of escalating intimacy, casual meetings that became longer encounters, professional distance that became personal closeness, innocent conversations that became intimate embraces. The timestamp showed that Selah had been lying to me for over a month. All those late nights at the office, all those weekend work sessions, all those mysterious phone calls, they'd been cover stories for her affair with a graduate student 6 years younger than her. My phone rang. Jules, one of Selah's law firm colleagues and part of what I'd started thinking of as the coven, the group of women who enabled each other's worst impulses and treated their relationships like reality television drama. "Dean?" Jules sounded nervous. "I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Selah's phone." "What can I do for you, Jules?" "I wanted to talk to you about what happened. Selah is really upset, and I think maybe if you two could just sit down and have a rational conversation." "Jules, I appreciate the concern, but there's nothing to discuss. Selah made her choices and now she's dealing with the consequences." "But she's saying you're trying to destroy her career, that you went to Whitman and showed him compromising photos." "I showed him publicly available images that demonstrate why our engagement ended. If that affects her career, maybe she should have considered that before she decided to have her midlife crisis at a college party. She's not having a midlife crisis, she just made a mistake. Multiple mistakes, over multiple weeks, with multiple men. At some point, Jules, a pattern of mistakes becomes a pattern of choices." There was a long pause. "You know about the other times?" I hadn't known about other times, but Jules had just confirmed that there were other times. "I know enough." "Dean, look, I'm not defending what she did, but she's my friend, and I'm worried about her. She's talking about fighting the divorce, maybe claiming you were abusive or controlling." "Is she now? That's interesting, because I've been recording our conversation since this started, and I haven't heard anything that would support those claims." Another pause. "You've been recording her?" "I've been protecting myself. When someone starts making threats about false accusations, it's wise to have documentation of what really happened." "She's just scared, Dean. Her whole life is falling apart." "Her whole life is falling apart because she chose to tear it apart. I didn't make her cheat. I didn't make her lie. I didn't make her choose a graduate student over her fiancé. Those were her decisions. But now you're punishing her for them." "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just not protecting her from the natural consequences of her actions anymore." After Jules hung up, I sat back and considered what I'd learned. Selah was planning to claim I was abusive. That was predictable. When women like her got caught cheating, they often tried to flip the narrative and make themselves the victim. But I'd been expecting that move, and I'd been preparing for it. I opened my laptop and reviewed the audio files I'd been collecting since our confrontation. Every conversation, every phone call, every interaction had been recorded and stored in multiple locations. If Selah wanted to claim I was controlling or abusive, she'd have to explain why the recording showed her admitting to cheating, lying, and planning to manipulate the divorce proceedings. My phone buzzed with a text from Ray. "Can we talk? Important." I texted back, "Murphy's Tavern, 1 hour." Ray arrived looking nervous and guilty, which was unusual for someone who normally projected confidence bordering on arrogance. She slid into the booth across from me and immediately started fidgeting with her phone. "Thanks for meeting me," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see any of Selah's friends." "You're not really her friend, are you? Friends don't secretly record each other's indiscretions and hand the evidence to their fiancés." She smiled at that. "You're smarter than she gave you credit for." Everyone's smarter than she gave them credit for. That was always her problem. She assumed everyone else was too stupid to figure out what she was really doing. "She's planning something, Dean. Something bad." I assumed she was. "What kind of something?" Ray pulled out her phone and played an audio recording. Selah's voice, clear and unmistakable. "I need to make Dean look like the bad guy here. If I can prove he was controlling or abusive, I can get the house and half his business." Then Mira's voice. "What kind of proof do you need?" "Bruises would be good. Medical records showing a pattern of domestic violence. Maybe some witnesses who saw him lose his temper." "Can you get bruises?" "I can make bruises. The question is whether I can make them look convincing. The recording continued for another 5 minutes, with Selah and Mira planning an elaborate scheme to frame me for domestic abuse. They discussed which hospital to visit, which friends could be counted on to lie under oath, and how to make the timeline work with the divorce proceedings. "When was this recorded?" I asked. "This morning, at Mira's apartment. I was supposed to be there for moral support, but when I heard what they were planning..." She shrugged. "I may be a lot of things, but I'm not okay with destroying innocent people." "Why are you helping me?" "Because Selah's been treating you like garbage for months, and you didn't deserve any of this. Also because Mira's been sleeping with my boyfriend, and I'm tired of pretending I don't know about it. Revenge is a dish best served cold?" Something like that. I copied the audio file to my phone and then to my cloud storage accounts. "This is very helpful, Ray. Thank you. What are you going to do with it?" "Whatever I need to do to protect myself. If Selah wants to play games with domestic abuse allegations, she's going to learn that some games have very serious consequences." After Ray left, I called Rusty and asked him to meet me at the house. When he arrived, I played him the recording and showed him Ms. Harker's photographs. "This is bad, Dean," he said when I'd finished. "If she follows through with this plan, it could destroy your life even if the charges don't stick. Domestic abuse allegations have a way of following men around forever." "I know. That's why I need to get ahead of it." "What do you have in mind?" "I'm thinking it's time to have a conversation with Selah and her co-conspirators. All of them. At the same time. In a place where there are witnesses." "That sounds like a trap." "It is a trap, but not for me." I pulled out my phone and sent a group text to Selah, Mira, and Jules. "We need to talk, all of us. Tonight at 8 p.m. at the Riverside Inn, Conference Room B. Come alone." The Riverside Inn was where our wedding reception was supposed to have been held. The irony seemed appropriate. Selah texted back immediately. "Why there?" I replied. "Because it's neutral ground, and because I want to discuss our future in the place where we were supposed to celebrate it." Mira texted, "This sounds like an ambush." I replied, "It's a conversation. If you're not comfortable having a conversation, maybe that says something about your position." Jules texted, "I don't think this is a good idea." I replied, "I think it's a great idea, unless you have something to hide." By 7:30, I was at the inn, setting up recording equipment in the conference room. Nothing hidden or illegal, just my phone on the table, clearly visible, with a sign that said, "This conversation is being recorded for legal purposes." At 8 o'clock exactly, they arrived together, which told me they'd been planning their strategy. Selah looked nervous but determined. Mira looked angry and defensive. Jules looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from me. "We have a lot to discuss." "Dean," Selah started, "I know you're angry, but—" "I'm not angry," I interrupted. "Anger is an emotion. This is business. You've been planning to accuse me of domestic abuse to gain an advantage in our divorce proceedings. I have recordings of you discussing this plan in detail. I thought we should talk about that." The color drained from all three faces simultaneously. "I don't know what you're talking about," Selah said, but her voice lacked conviction. I played 30 seconds of Ray's recording, the part where Selah discussed making fake bruises and finding witnesses to lie under oath. "Still don't know what I'm talking about?" I asked. Mira leaned forward aggressively. "That recording is illegal. You can't use it." "Actually, it's not illegal. New York is a one-party consent state, which means as long as one person in the conversation consents to the recording, it's perfectly legal." Ray consented. She's the one who made the recording. "Ray recorded us?" Selah looked genuinely shocked. "Ray recorded you planning to commit perjury, file false police reports, and attempt to defraud me out of my house and business. Those are serious crimes, Selah, the kind that could end your legal career permanently. You can't prove—" "I can prove everything. I have the recordings. I have photographs of your affair. I have documentation of your lies, and I have witnesses who will testify about your behavior. If you want to turn this into a legal battle, you will lose. Badly. And you'll lose a lot more than just our relationship." The room was completely quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on Main Street. "What do you want?" Mira asked finally. "I want you to stop. All of you. Stop the lies, stop the schemes, stop trying to make me the villain in your story. Selah cheated. Selah lied. Selah destroyed our relationship. Those are the facts, and no amount of manipulation is going to change them." "And if we agree to stop?" Jules asked. "Then this stays between us. The recordings don't go to the police or the State Bar Association. The photographs don't get posted online. Everyone moves on with their lives." "And if we don't agree?" Selah asked. "Then you find out what it's like when someone smarter than you decides to stop playing defense and start playing offense." I stood up, pocketed my phone, and headed for the door. "Think about it," I said. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide." I didn't sleep well that night, but it wasn't because of stress or anxiety. It was because I was finally, for the first time in months, excited about something. I'd spent so long being reactive, responding to Selah's lies, accommodating her moods, trying to fix problems she created, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be proactive. The next morning brought no response to my ultimatum, which told me everything I needed to know about Selah's decision. If she'd been planning to back down, she would have called by 6 a.m. with tears and apologies and promises to do better. The silence meant she was still plotting. That was fine with me. I'd been hoping she'd choose the hard way. I spent the morning working on a kitchen renovation across town, but my heart wasn't in it. The homeowner, a retired teacher named Mrs. Patterson, kept asking if I was feeling all right because I seemed distracted. "Just some personal issues," I told her. "Nothing that won't sort itself out soon." "Woman trouble?" she asked with the knowing smile of someone who'd been married for 45 years. "Something like that." "Well, whatever it is, I'm sure you'll handle it just fine. You seem like the type of man who thinks things through." She had no idea how much thinking I'd been doing. Around noon, Rusty called. "You need to see something. Can you meet me at the old Riverside Hotel?" The Riverside Hotel had been abandoned for 15 years, ever since the new Hampton Inn opened near the highway and stole all their business. It sat on the edge of town like a monument to better times, 3 stories of faded brick and broken windows that the city council kept promising to either renovate or demolish. I found Rusty in the parking lot, standing next to his pickup truck with a grim expression. "What's going on?" I asked. "Got a call from a friend who still works dispatch. Seems someone reported suspicious activity here last night. People coming and going, lights in the windows, that sort of thing." "Kids, probably. This place has been a party spot for years." "Maybe, but the caller said they recognized one of the cars. Silver Audi." Selah's car. I looked up at the hotel's broken windows and felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What do you think they were doing here?" "Nothing good. Want to take a look around?" The front door was chained shut, but there was a service entrance on the side that had been pried open months ago. We made our way through the lobby, stepping carefully around debris and broken glass. The place smelled like mold and decay, with undertones of stale beer and cigarette smoke from years of unauthorized parties. "Up here," Rusty said, pointing to the staircase. The second floor was a maze of empty hotel rooms with doors hanging open like mouths. Most were filled with trash and graffiti, but room 237 was different. Someone had cleaned it out recently and set up what looked like a makeshift meeting space, folding chairs arranged in a circle, empty coffee cups, a whiteboard with writing that had been hastily erased. "This is where they met," I said. Rusty nodded, pulling out his phone to take pictures. "Question is, what were they planning?" I found the answer in the trash can, crumpled papers covered with handwriting I recognized. Selah's handwriting, lists of my daily routines, notes about my work schedule, observations about my habits and patterns. "They're surveilling me," I said, showing Rusty the papers. "Looks like it. But why?" The answer came in the form of a text message to my phone. "Meet us at the hotel tonight, 9 p.m., room 237. Come alone or everyone sees the video." It was from Evan's number, but I doubted he'd sent it. This had Selah's fingerprints all over it. The dramatic location, the ultimatum, the assumption that she could manipulate me into doing what she wanted. "It's a trap," Rusty said when I showed him the message. "Obviously. The question is, what kind of trap? The kind where you don't come back." I considered that possibility. Selah was desperate, and desperate people did stupid things, but she was also a lawyer, which meant she understood the legal consequences of violence. More likely, this was an attempt to get me alone so they could stage some kind of incident. Maybe the domestic abuse scenario they'd been planning, maybe something else. "I'm going," I said. "Like hell you are. I'm going, but not alone, and not unprepared." I spent the afternoon getting ready. First, I called Ms. Harker and asked if she'd be willing to help with a project that might get a little complicated. She agreed immediately. Apparently, 73 years of small-town life had left her with a taste for drama. Then I called Letitia and asked if she could arrange for some of Murphy's regulars to be in the area around 9 o'clock. She didn't ask why, just said she'd take care of it. Finally, I set up recording equipment throughout the hotel room, not just audio this time, but video cameras hidden in strategic locations. If Selah wanted to stage an incident, she was going to do it on camera. At 8:30, I was in position. The hotel felt different at night, more menacing, more like the haunted house it resembled. I'd chosen my spot carefully, in an adjoining room with a clear view of 237 but multiple exit routes if things went wrong. At 9 o'clock exactly, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Multiple sets, moving carefully in the darkness. I counted at least 4 people, maybe 5. They filed into room 237, Selah, Mira, Jules, and Evan, plus someone I didn't recognize. A large man in dark clothing who looked like he'd been hired for muscle rather than conversation. "Where is he?" Selah asked, looking around the empty room. "He'll be here," Evan said, but he sounded nervous. I waited another 5 minutes, letting them get comfortable, letting them start to worry that their plan wasn't working. Then I stepped into the doorway. "Sorry I'm late," I said. "Traffic." They all turned toward me, and I saw a range of expressions: anger, fear, determination, and in the case of the hired muscle, professional indifference. "Dean," Selah said, trying to sound relieved. "Thank you for coming. We really need to talk." "I'm sure we do, though I have to say, this is an interesting choice of venue. Very atmospheric." I stepped into the room, noting the positions of everyone present. Selah and Mira were near the window, blocking one potential exit. Jules was by the door I'd entered through. Evan and the muscle were positioned to flank me if I moved toward the center of the room. "We've been thinking about your ultimatum," Mira said, "and we've decided we don't like being threatened." "That's unfortunate, because the alternative to accepting my terms is considerably less pleasant than the terms themselves." "Is it?" the muscle asked, speaking for the first time. His voice was exactly what you'd expect: deep, rough, with the kind of confidence that came from being the biggest person in most rooms. "For you? Probably not. You're just hired help. But for them?" I gestured to Selah and her friends. "Yes, very much so." "You're bluffing," Evan said. "You don't have anything we can't explain away." I pulled out my phone and played a different recording, not the one from Ray, but one I'd made myself the previous evening. Selah's voice, clear and unmistakable, discussing her plan to lure me to the hotel and stage an incident that would support her domestic abuse claims. "Still think I'm bluffing?" I asked. The room went quiet except for the sound of wind through broken windows and distant traffic. "How did you," Selah started, "record you planning this meeting?" "Easy. I've been recording everything since our engagement ended. Every phone call, every conversation, every threat. Did you really think I was stupid enough to walk into an obvious trap without taking precautions? You're not walking out of here with those recordings, the muscle said, taking a step toward me. Actually, I am. Because if I don't check in with my backup in exactly 10 minutes, those recordings get sent automatically to the police, the State Bar Association, and every news outlet in the region. You're lying. Am I? Want to test that theory? I looked at each of them in turn, letting them see that I wasn't afraid, wasn't backing down, wasn't going to be intimidated by their amateur hour theatrics. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to let me walk out of here. You're going to stop plotting against me. You're going to accept that your schemes have failed and move on with your lives. And in return, I won't destroy all of you. And if we don't agree? Mira asked. Then you find out what happens when someone with actual intelligence decides to stop playing games with amateurs. Evan stepped forward, trying to look threatening. You think you're so smart, old man? You think you've got this all figured out? I think I've been 3 steps ahead of you since this started. I think you're all so used to manipulating people who care about you that you forgot what it's like to deal with someone who doesn't. We could just take your phone, he said. Delete everything. You could try. But the recordings aren't just on my phone. They're in multiple cloud accounts, on multiple devices, with multiple people who have instructions about what to do if something happens to me. I could see them processing this, realizing that their simple plan had become complicated, that the contractor they'd underestimated had outmaneuvered them completely. This isn't over, Selah said finally. Yes, it is. You just don't realize it yet. I walked toward the door, noting that Jules stepped aside to let me pass. The muscle tensed, but Selah shook her head slightly, and he stayed where he was. Oh, and Selah? I said, turning back from the doorway. You might want to check your social media accounts. Seems like someone posted some interesting videos while we've been chatting. Her face went white. What videos? The ones from the party. All of them, unedited, with timestamps and location data. Funny how these things have a way of going viral. I left them standing in that abandoned hotel room, probably trying to figure out if I was bluffing about the social media posts. I wasn't. Ray had uploaded everything an hour ago, tagged with all the right keywords to ensure maximum visibility. By the time I reached my truck, my phone was buzzing with notifications. The videos were already being shared, commented on, and discussed across every social media platform that mattered in our small town. Selah's reputation was finished. Evan's graduate career was over. Mira's legal career was in jeopardy, and I was just getting started. The town's annual harvest festival was supposed to be a celebration. Local vendors, live music, families walking Main Street with cups of hot cider and bags of kettle corn. Instead, it became the stage for the final act of what people would later call the Callix divorce drama. I woke up that Saturday morning to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The videos Ray had posted were spreading beyond our small town, picked up by regional news outlets, and shared across college campuses throughout the state. Selah's law firm had released a statement distancing themselves from her conduct. The university had launched an investigation into Evan's behavior, and somehow I'd become the hero of a story I never wanted to be part of. You're famous, Letitia said when I stopped by Murphy's for coffee. She showed me her phone, where a local news website had posted an article titled Small Town Contractor Exposes Cheating Fiancée's Elaborate Revenge Plot. I didn't want to be famous, I said. Maybe not, but sometimes fame finds you anyway. Besides, it's good fame. You're the guy who stood up for himself and won. The festival was already crowded when I arrived at 10 a.m. Main Street had been closed to traffic, lined with booths selling everything from homemade jam to handcrafted furniture. A small stage at the intersection with Maple Street featured local musicians and community announcements. I wasn't planning to stay long, just wanted to support a few local businesses and maybe grab lunch from the barbecue truck. But as I walked through the crowd, I noticed people pointing at me, whispering to their friends, offering supportive nods and thumbs up. "Dean!" Mrs. Patterson, my client from earlier in the week, waved me over to her booth where she was selling quilts. "I saw the news about your situation. Good for you, standing up for yourself like that." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. Though, I wish it hadn't become so public. Sometimes public is the only way to get justice. That girl needed to learn that actions have consequences." As I continued through the festival, the pattern repeated itself. People I barely knew were congratulating me, sharing their own stories of betrayal and revenge, treating me like I'd won some kind of victory for wronged partners everywhere. It was flattering and uncomfortable at the same time. Around noon, I was standing in line at the barbecue truck when I heard familiar voices behind me. Selah, Mira, and Jules talking in the urgent whispers of people trying not to be overheard. Completely humiliated, I can't show my face anywhere in town. Maybe we should leave. Go somewhere else until this blows over. It's not going to blow over. Those videos are everywhere. My parents saw them, my boss saw them, everyone I went to law school with has seen them. I turned around slowly. They were standing about 10 feet away, huddled together like conspirators, all three looking like they'd aged 5 years in the past week. Selah saw me first. Her face went through several expressions: anger, embarrassment, something that might have been regret, before settling on cold determination. "Dean," she said, loud enough for people around us to hear, "I want to talk to you. I'm listening. Privately. No. If you have something to say to me, you can say it here, in front of everyone. I'm done with private conversations and secret meetings." She looked around at the crowd that was starting to gather, drawn by the obvious tension. I recognized faces from around town, people I'd done work for, people I'd gone to high school with, people who'd seen the videos and read the news stories. "Fine," she said. "You want to do this publicly? Let's do it publicly." She stepped closer, her voice rising. "You destroyed my life, Dean. You ruined my career, humiliated me in front of the entire town, and for what? Because I made one mistake?" "One mistake?" I asked. "Selah, you had an affair for over a month. You lied to me repeatedly. You planned to frame me for domestic abuse. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of choices. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, and instead of taking responsibility for your choices, you tried to make me the villain. You tried to destroy my reputation to protect yours." The crowd was growing larger, people pulling out phones to record what was obviously going to be a memorable confrontation. I could see Letitia at the edge of the group, grinning like she was watching her favorite television show. "You didn't have to humiliate me," Selah said, tears starting to flow. "You could have just divorced me quietly. You didn't have to turn it into a public spectacle." "I didn't turn it into anything. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your actions. The public spectacle was your choice when you decided to cheat with a college student at a party where people were recording everything. That's not fair." "Fair?" I felt something hot and angry rise in my chest. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you lied to me for months? Was it fair when you planned to accuse me of abuse to steal my house? Was it fair when you hired muscle to intimidate me at that hotel?" Gasps from the crowd. Apparently, that part of the story hadn't made it into the news reports yet. "I never," Selah started. "You never what? Never planned to destroy my life to cover up your affair? Never conspired with your friends to commit perjury? Never tried to manipulate everyone around you into believing I was the problem?" I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see. "I have recordings, Selah, hours of them. Every lie you told, every scheme you planned, every threat you made. Would you like me to play them for everyone?" "No," she said quickly. "Please, Dean, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. Can't we just end this? We can end it right now. All you have to do is tell the truth. Tell everyone here what really happened. No lies, no manipulation, no trying to make yourself the victim, just the truth." She looked around at the crowd of faces, all waiting for her response. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out if there was still some way to spin this in her favor. She started, then stopped. I made mistakes. What kind of mistakes? I cheated on you, with Evan, and maybe a few other people. More gasps from the crowd. The few other people was news to me, but I wasn't surprised. And? I prompted, and I lied about it. I tried to cover it up. I tried to make you look like the bad guy so people wouldn't blame me. And? She was crying harder now, mascara running down her cheeks. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Dean. You didn't deserve any of this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or vindication, but pity. She'd destroyed her own life trying to avoid responsibility for her choices, and now she was standing in the middle of Main Street, publicly humiliated, with nowhere left to run. Thank you, I said quietly. That's all I ever wanted, just the truth. I started to walk away, but she caught my arm. Dean, wait. What happens now? Where do I go from here? I don't know, Selah. That's not my problem anymore. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them. But I don't have anywhere to go. I lost my job, my apartment, my friends. You didn't lose those things. You threw them away. There's a difference. I gently pulled my arm free and walked through the crowd, which parted to let me pass. Behind me, I could hear Selah still crying, still trying to explain herself to anyone who would listen. At the edge of the festival area, I found Rusty waiting by his truck. That was either the most satisfying thing I've ever seen or the cruelest, he said. Maybe both. But it's over now. Is it? Really? I thought about that as we walked back toward Main Street. The videos would eventually stop circulating. The news stories would be replaced by newer scandals. People would move on to the next drama. But the truth would remain. Selah had cheated, lied, and schemed, and when confronted with the consequences of her choices, she'd finally admitted it. That truth was worth more than any revenge I could have planned. Yeah, I said. It's over. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the festival video online. You handled that with more class than she deserved. Good for you. Then another. My wife cheated too. Watching you stand up for yourself gave me courage to do the same. Thank you. And another. You're a hero, man. Don't let anyone tell you different. I turned off my phone and put it in my pocket. I'd had enough of being a public figure for one day. But as I walked home through the quiet streets of my small town, past houses I'd wired and porches I'd built and lives I'd helped improve, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the peace of victory or revenge, but the peace of finally being honest about who I was and what I deserved. I wasn't the nice guy who got walked on anymore. I wasn't the contractor who was too blue-collar to understand sophisticated games. I was just Dean Callix, a man who'd learned that sometimes the best way to win is to stop playing other people's games and start playing your own. The autumn sun was setting behind the maples that gave our town its name, casting long shadows across the sidewalks and painting everything in shades of gold and amber. It was beautiful weather for a new beginning. And that's exactly what this was.